Melanie Ericksen, thank you so much for joining me on Record Scratch. It's such a pleasure, privilege, honor to see you, at least through this medium, my beautiful, beautiful healer in my life. Thank you so much for joining me.
And Kara, thank you so much for asking. It's such an honor and pleasure to be here. And when I was thinking about our time together today, I thought that the name of your podcast, Record Scratch, is just so energetically aligned for those moments that we all go through in our life when we have that record scratch moment.
When I came to you, it was a very raw moment of grief, and I was struggling to figure out how to work with it. And I had just said to you offline I wanted to heal enough to be able to live with grief versus it living with me and not be overwhelmed by it. And I know that you've dealt with loss. It affects everyone. What's your advice for people as they are entering into this? Maybe it's uncharted territory, but what are the tools that you recommend to cope with grief?
Grief is its own animal, Kara. It is, as we know, it's different for everybody. And I feel the most important advice I can give is to seek support and don't isolate, to really give yourself permission and own that where you're at is exactly where you need to be, because there are, 5 stages of grief is kind of what we are taught, as we're, for our society and everything. But I have found I actually added rebellion as a 6th stage. There's just so many stages of it. But I feel like if you could really give yourself, have the courage to feel and process the emotions so that they don't really stick in our bodies. We need to process those emotions and love ourselves right where we're at.
And Claire, oh yeah. And Claire Bidwell Smith wrote a book on anxiety, the 6th stage of grief. And I do, in my research on grief, I've checked out every book at the library, and the 5 stages just didn't resonate with me. I thought, okay, I've got anger down, anger down. And, but I didn't have any of the others. Acceptance has not been a problem with me. And then I realized that those were written for someone who is dying, not for the bereaved. Right. And so, and I wanted you to elaborate a little bit on your process.
Well, the energy of grief, especially if it's sudden, can really impact us. And when I lost my brother suddenly, I had never had a panic attack in my life. My body was waking up in the middle of the night looking for Kip. And it was such a shock to me, his passing, but it was also a shock how my body responded. It wasn't something I could think through or even talk through. I needed movement as my medicine. So I spent time in nature. I had to, I almost moved too much where I ended up in the hospital. So that's where you use a combination of trying to, dissipate that grief. Grief does need to be processed, or I'll say dissipated. If you've read every book, you've heard probably, the study that's done about the cheetah or the gazelle, that, animals shake off that energy and they move on. And as humans, we often suppress it, and it wants to come out it can be biosymbolic, down the road. I'm going to kind of share a little story with one of my family members who wasn't able really to process grief in their body right now. She's having a hard time moving. It can gather in our soma, in our cells too, as just that energy. So I have found out that the somatic release of grief through movement, tears, sound, is really, because, you know, it's very cumulative, you know, and helping us move through whatever, I'm not even going to call it stage, just whatever kind of level we are at.